I never thought a bow could weigh this much until my son handed me a bottle of whiskey and said, half smiling, "Just don't choke on it, Dad." It was July 4th. Mid-afternoon in Riverton, Ohio, 93 degrees. The air thick with the smell of barbecue smoke and cut grass. My daughter Mara was arranging paper plates under the maple tree. My grandson Leo was bouncing a basketball against the garage. And the whole yard was pretending it was a normal family gathering. But Brent, my son, wasn't pretending well. His smile was a rehearsed one, the kind you buy before a lie. He set the whiskey bottle down in the center of the patio table like a trophy. "You've earned this," he said. "Something special." The label caught the sunlight. Tennessee Reserve, 25-year oak, a bottle that costs more than my week's groceries. I turned it in my hands, and the amber shimmered like a promise I didn't believe in. Brent had been acting off for months. Long pauses in phone calls, strange urgency about future planning. I'd dismissed it as stress. That afternoon, though, his words lodged under my skin like splinters. "Just don't choke on it." The bow was too perfect, the paper too crisp. Even his laughter came half a beat too late. I told myself I was overthinking. That's what old engineers do, calculate the load on everything, even love. The day rolled on. The grill hissed and smoked. Leo bragged about finishing his science project early. Mara kept refilling everyone's glasses. Brent barely touched his food. Every few minutes his eyes flicked to the bottle, like he was checking a clock. "Dad," he said quietly as the sun went down, "save that whiskey for later. When you're alone, you'll really taste it." Something inside me tightened. Not fear exactly, just a small, cold question that didn't want to go away. By the time the sparklers came out and the paper plates stacked into a sagging tower, the house had settled into the soft mess that follows celebration. Hugs in the driveway, promises about Pancake Saturday, Leo talking fast about parabolas, Mara lingering half a beat longer when she hugged me, listening with her hands the way good daughters do. Brent's hug was different, a quick pat on the back like a man tapping a briefcase to make sure it's still there. "Enjoy it, Dad," he said, touching the bottle with 2 fingers. "Save it for later, alone." When the last car taillights dissolved, the kitchen felt too clean. I set the bottle on the counter and watched it under the bright light. The cap looked factory tight, the seal unbroken. My reflection bent and straightened in the glass. I reached for a heavy-bottomed tumbler, then stopped with my hand hovering an inch above it. I've seen bridges fail, not because a single thing was wrong, but because 100 small doubts were waved off. I don't wave off doubts anymore. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Leo. "Grandpa, don't drink the whiskey Dad gave you." He told me to go inside, and I saw him put something in it in the garage. "Please don't drink. I'm deleting this." My breath went thin and precise, the way it gets when the world shrinks to a measurement. I typed with 2 careful thumbs, "Thank you. I'm okay. You did the right thing. Delete and go to bed. Love you." His reply came fast, too grown for 14. "I love you. Please promise, I promise. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Sometimes the only thing that keeps a man alive is proof, and people who believe him." I put the phone face down and looked at the bottle. You don't argue with steel. You test it. You don't argue with a gift that feels like a threat. You document it. I took photographs, front label, back label, shoulder cap. I turned the bottle until the stamped lot code was legible and shot that too. I placed the stove clock in frame for time reference. Then I opened the junk drawer the way I used to open field kits, expecting the tool I needed to be right where I left it. Clean mason jar, funnel, blue painter's tape, black Sharpie. I rinsed the jar and funnel twice with hot water, then once with bottled water, let them air dry on a clean tea towel. I wrote on the tape, "Whiskey sample, July 4th, 10:21 p.m., Kane Kitchen," and stuck it to the lid. I cracked the cap just enough that it exhaled a thin smell of oak and vanilla. I poured a careful 2 ounces into the jar, trying not to let the liquid touch the rim, and sealed it tight. I photographed the pour, the seal, the labeled lid, the bottle and the jar side by side with the clock in the corner. Chain of custody starts with a clean surface and a pen that doesn't skip. I didn't pour the rest down the sink. Not because I doubted Leo, but because I respected him. Proof is a gift you give the future, so it doesn't have to guess. I wiped the bottle with a fresh paper towel, slid it into a zip bag, tied it off, and set it in the cool darkness of the pantry. The jar went into a small soft cooler with 2 ice packs. I wrote a quick note on a yellow pad and tucked it under the cooler's strap. Sample, keep cold. Do not open. For lab, I made a list because that's how I make fear hold still. Morning, Riverton Diagnostics comprehensive screen. If they balk, Lakeview by the highway. You call Dr. Porter for baseline, document no sedatives. Ask Raj to witness second draw. Safe deposit box for originals. Attorney later if the numbers sing the tune I think they will. Only then did I let myself think of April. Brookside Diner. Brent stirring sugar into his coffee like he was beating a deadline. Dad, we can streamline things, he'd said, sliding a folded paper across the formica. Avoid probate. I'll be a signer just in case. Keep it simple. He'd said we a lot. The way people do when they're asking for something they hope you'll mistake for generosity. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't said no. I took the paper home and filed it under think, which in my house is a synonym for wait. I washed the single tumbler I hadn't used and set it upside down in the rack. I wiped the counter twice, the way Helen used to, long strokes, no noise. The house can tell when you're lying to it. I wanted mine to hear the truth. I'm not drinking this. I'm not dying quietly. I turned off lights room by room. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the mattress and wrote the plan again, smaller, on an index card. Lab, doctor, witness, box, counsel, no alone. I slid the card under my watch on the nightstand, where my morning hand would find it without thinking. I lay on top of the covers with one shoe on, a habit from road jobs I never broke. I imagined Leo deleting the text and staring at his ceiling, counting courage instead of sheep. I imagined Mara rinsing cups and finding one she missed, lifting it to the light, frowning at a spot. I imagined Brent lying on his back, rehearsing lines for a conversation he thought he'd already won. Sometime after midnight, a firework cracked the sky open 2 streets over and drifted down as silent ash. I watched it from the window. The neighborhood exhaled and folded back into itself. I wrote one more line on the index card in the dark, pressing hard enough to feel it through the paper. I will not be alone with a whisper. I slept in slices. When I woke at 5:41, the house felt level, bubble-centered. I shaved, put on the blue shirt that keeps its creases, and made coffee I didn't pour. I set the cooler on the passenger seat and buckled it the way you buckle a child when you love them. The bottle stayed in the pantry, bag tied, air still. As I locked the front door, I pressed my palm flat against it and said out loud to nobody and everybody, "We solve problems before they break." Then I walked to the truck and turned the key. The day had work for me, and I was ready to do it. By morning, I was the kind of calm that makes people nervous. Years of bridge work taught me that panic wastes daylight. You check bolts, not your pulse. I put the cooler on the passenger seat, buckled it like a child, and drove toward Riverton Diagnostics, the glass and steel building that looks like it should be studying weather from space. The July sun flashed off its windows, sharp enough to cut through denial. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and copy paper. The receptionist barely glanced at me when I set the cooler on the counter. "Comprehensive toxicology screen," I said, sliding my driver's license across. She handed me a clipboard, asked if the sample was biological. "Beverage," I said. "Possible adulteration." That word felt strange in my mouth. Adulteration, but it was the only one that fit the way the bottle had looked sitting there. Pretending to celebrate me, I wrote everything carefully. Name, Walter Kane. Date, July 5th. Purpose, beverage analysis, suspected contamination. Chain of custody, self-collected, sealed, documented. When I signed the bottom, my hand didn't shake. That's when I knew I was angry, not afraid. A young technician with kind eyes led me through a frosted glass door into a narrow room lined with metal counters. "We'll run a full panel," she said. "Results in a few hours." "Hours!" I repeated. "Best we can do. Chemistry takes time." She smiled, the professional kind that tries to lend you patience. I nodded, set the cooler down, watched her unseal the jar, pipette a fefew drops into a vial, and record the lot number. She labeled it in tidy handwriting, Sample 01, Kane, W, 7525 beverage. The jar looked ordinary under the fluorescent light. That was the part that hurt. Poison never waves from the window. Back in the waiting area, I sat beneath a wall clock that ticked louder than it should. I opened an old issue of Popular Mechanics and read the same paragraph 5 times. People came and went. A mother holding a toddler, a man limping on crutches, a nurse tapping on a tablet. They all had reasons to be there. Mine was the only one that felt like betrayal in a bottle. At 10:03 a.m., I stepped outside and called Mara. "Just checking in," I said. She sounded bright, distracted, coffee maker humming in the background. "You okay, Dad?" "Yesterday was a big day." "Fine," I said. "Tired. Did you try the whiskey yet?" she asked, joking. I looked at my reflection in the clinic window, an old man who had aged overnight. "Not yet," I said, and that was the truest thing I could say. When I hung up, I noticed a message from Brent. "How's the bottle?" "Smooth, right?" I didn't answer. I turned off my phone and went back inside. At 11:48, a woman in a white coat stepped into the room and said my name. Her tone was gentle, but not casual. The way nurses sound when they've seen what comes next. "Mr. Kane, we've got your results." The consultation room was small and cold. A printout waited on the table, peaks and valleys like a mountain range. She slid it toward me. "We detected a benzodiazepine derivative, a sedative compound. Small concentration, but over time it could cause respiratory depression, confusion, falls, even cardiac issues." "How much is small?" I asked. "Enough that if someone your age drank a glass every night, it would accumulate." "Slow, subtle, fatal over months, not days," she paused. "We can't make legal assumptions, but you've said enough," I told her. She looked at me carefully. "Would you like a certified copy of the report?" "I'd like 3, I said. "And your card." She printed the pages, signed the bottom, and embossed them with a faint blue seal. I watched the stamp press down, the circle of proof forming right there on the paper. It was the sound of certainty. When I stepped into the elevator, the mirrored walls threw my reflection back from every side. I didn't look like a man who had just confirmed his son tried to kill him. I looked like an engineer on his way to a meeting, pressed shirt, clipboard underarm, face set in neutral. Outside, the heat hit like a second truth. I opened the truck door, set the folder carefully on the passenger seat beside the now empty cooler, and whispered, "Confirmed." The drive home was quiet. No radio, no news. Just the steady hum of tires and the soft click of my turn signal every few miles. I thought about all the years I'd spent teaching Brent about integrity, about load paths and safety factors, about how a bridge only fails when someone ignores the small signs. He'd learned those lessons. He just used them on people instead of concrete. At home, I cleared the kitchen table and laid everything out like blueprints. The bottle still sat in its plastic bag, undisturbed. I placed the lab report beside it, aligned the edges perfectly. Then I took a photograph, evidence meeting motive in one frame. Next to the report, I placed a picture of Brent when he was 12, holding the hammer I'd given him for his first project. His smile then was real, his eyes bright. The boy who'd said, "One day I'll build something that lasts." I whispered, "You did, son. Just not what you think." I opened a notebook and wrote in block letters across the top of a fresh page, "Find out why." Underneath, I drew 3 lines, motive, method, proof I already had. Method, the lab spelled out. Motive, money, control, inheritance, maybe fear of waiting his turn. I'd seen this pattern before in design reports, people trying to cut corners, make the structure bear more weight than it should. I poured myself black coffee, no sugar. It tasted bitter enough to match the day. Then I wrote the line that would define the rest of my week. We solve problems before they break. At 2:17 p.m., I slipped the lab report into a manila folder labeled Whiskey Primary Analysis, sealed it with tape, and placed it in my desk drawer under the file marked Taxes. Old habits die hard. The phone buzzed again. "Brent," another message. We should grab dinner soon, just us. Got something to talk about. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Just us, I said aloud. The words tasting like metal. I powered the phone off. Outside, the neighborhood carried on. Lawnmowers droning. Kids yelling through sprinklers. The harmless chaos of ordinary life. Inside my house, the air felt different now. Heavy awake, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man who had a problem to engineer. A bridge to inspect. Tomorrow, I'd start the second test. Bring in a witness. Double-check the data. Tighten the bolts, because what my son didn't know was this. I've built things to outlast storms. And this one would hold. The next morning, the world looked unchanged. Same blue sky, same hum of lawnmowers, but I wasn't the same man walking under it. Knowledge alters weight. You carry air differently when you know someone you raised wants you gone. I set the lab folder on my kitchen table. The morning light slid across it like it was searching for fingerprints. I didn't touch the bottle, not yet. I wanted to build the foundation first. Proof, witness, record, sequence. Engineers don't react. We calculate. Revenge, if it ever comes, must be measured in millimeters, not emotions. I opened my grey filing cabinet, the one labelled Home and Family, and pulled out a folder so thick its corners were soft. Brent Assistance. I hadn't looked through it in years. The papers smelled faintly of ink and regret. Mortgage slips, tuition payments, car insurance, 2 bail transfers I never told Mara about. A history of believing in him when no one else did. I started adding the numbers with a dull pencil. 15,000, 12,000, 5, 8, another 10. The total came out to $213,480. More than my pension's annual yield? I wrote it cleanly across the top. $213,480. Spent in faith. I flipped to the earliest page, 2003, Brent's college deposit. Thanks, Dad, written in his boyish handwriting. Then 2007, his first apartment lease. I'll pay you back soon. 2011, the job that didn't last. I just need a bridge, Dad. Always the same word, bridge. He knew what it meant to me. Structure, support, something you trust enough to drive over. He'd used it like a password to my heart. I closed the folder and leaned back. The room was quiet, except for the refrigerator's low hum. I thought about Helen, how she'd told me once, "You can't fix people like beams, Walt. They crack in places you can't reach." I hadn't believed her then. I do now. At 9:03 the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Leo standing there, backpack half unzipped, his hair a wild mess of teenage sleep. "Mom dropped me off," he said. "I told her I wanted to help with the yard." "Good cover story," I said softly. "Come in." He stepped inside, eyes darting toward the kitchen counter. "Did you—" "No," I interrupted. "I didn't drink it." He let out a breath so deep I heard his sneakers squeak on the tile. "I thought maybe you'd think I was lying." I crouched down to his level. "Leo, you told the truth when it mattered. That's something even adults forget how to do." He looked ashamed, like his warning had broken something. "Dad said it was just a joke, that he wanted to see if you'd notice. Did he tell you to delete the text?" He nodded. "He said family shouldn't spy on family." "Family shouldn't poison family either," I said quietly. His eyes widened, not in shock, but in the dawning understanding of what that meant. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I shook my head. "Never apologize for bringing daylight." He left an hour later, pretending to go to the park. I watched him walk down the sidewalk, backpack bouncing, shoulders a little straighter. That boy was the only reason I was still breathing, literally and otherwise. I turned back to the table. I photographed the folder, the ledger totals, and the signature pages of each transfer. Then I printed the bank statements to match. The printer chattered like an old typewriter, steady and faithful. Each sheet slid out like a verdict. On the last page, I noticed something new, a transfer I hadn't authorized. 4 weeks earlier, $500 pulled from the joint emergency account Brent used to access for bills. The memo read, "Loan advance, repay soon." My chest went cold. He'd already started taking pieces before the bottle ever showed up. The whiskey wasn't the first theft. It was just the first one he wanted hidden. I circled the date in red and wrote, "Pattern continues." Then I made a new column, Motive, financial pressure. Opportunity, gift presentation. Method, sedation. Goal, access. I looked at the list and realized what this really was. Not just an attempted murder, but an accounting problem. He was trying to erase the debt column, starting with me. By noon, I'd gathered every document that defined our history. I placed them in a new binder, labeled Ledger of Facts. On the first page, I printed a quote I'd written years ago on a job site whiteboard. Steel doesn't lie, and neither do numbers. I wrote one more line under it. People do. After lunch, I called my neighbor Raj Singh. He answered on the second ring. Walter, everything okay? I need your eyes on something. Not an emergency, but it matters. He was at my door 10 minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag. What are we looking at? I showed him the lab report and the ledger. He read silently, his expression hardening with each line. That's your son? He finally asked. Yes, he exhaled through his nose. You want me as a witness? Second sample, I said. Chain of custody. Lakeview lab this time, he nodded once. Let's do it. We repeated the process together. Fresh jar, clean gloves, time-stamped photos, signed forms. He initialed every step. No gaps, no doubt. Engineers like partners who understand precision. Raj was that kind of man. After he left, I sat back at the table and stared at the pile of papers. The history of one father's blind generosity turned into evidence. In a way, I was building my own bridge again, but this one would lead out of something dark instead of over it. The day dimmed into evening. I cooked a frozen dinner I didn't taste, turned off my phone, and wrote a single line in my notebook before bed. Tomorrow begins the cleanup. I looked at Helen's framed photo on the dresser, her smile soft, her eyes forever in the act of forgiving. You were right, I told her quietly. You can't fix people like beams, but you can still make sure they don't bring the whole structure down. I left the binder open on the table beside the lab report, the way some men leave loaded guns. My weapon was paper. And paper never misses when you aim it with truth. By sunrise, I'd stopped calling it paranoia and started calling it procedure. Paranoia is what people say when they don't have data. Procedure is what keeps bridges standing. At 8:05 a.m., I dialed Raj again. He answered before the second ring. Still alive? He joked softly, the kind of humor men our age use to keep the dark from echoing too long. Still alive, I said. But I need a witness. He arrived in work boots, carrying his thermos like it was a legal document. Raj had been my neighbor for 17 years, a retired machinist with the same disease I had, the need for proof. We stood in the kitchen under the flat white light of the overhead bulb. The whiskey bottle sat in its sealed bag on the counter like evidence at trial. Same bottle? He asked. Same bottle. Never opened since the first drawer. I showed him the first lab report, the embossed stamp still faintly visible. He didn't speak. He read every line, slow and deliberate. When he was done, he folded the paper once and laid it back down like it could still burn. All right, he said. Let's do this right. We followed every step as if someone were filming. Fresh jar, gloves, photographs with time and date. Cap unsealed just enough for a small pour, not a splash wasted. He initialed the chain of custody form beside my signature. Lakeview Lab? He asked. Lakeview, I said. They're good with industrial testing. No one will think this is sentimental. Nothing about this is sentimental, he muttered. By 9:15, the new sample was sealed, labeled, and inside a small cooler packed with ice. Raj looked around my kitchen, the neat counters, the clock ticking like a patient heartbeat. What are you going to do with the original bottle? Keep it, chain of evidence. He nodded. You're handling this like a man who's built something that doesn't get to fall. That's the goal, I said. We drove together to Lakeview, the silence between us both heavy and polite. At the reception desk, I said the words again. Comprehensive screen, beverage, possible adulteration. The woman behind the counter gave the same neutral nod as yesterday's tech. Only difference was the temperature of the air, colder, like the world had noticed. As we left, Raj signed the final witness form and tore off his copy. Keep this one in a safe place, he said. I've got a box for it. He gave me that look only old friends can, half worry, half respect. You're steady, Walt, but steady men sometimes break when the quiet gets too long. I'll handle it, I said. Handle it, he repeated, squeezing my shoulder once before driving off. At 1:40 p.m., I parked outside Dr. Porter's clinic. She'd been my primary for over a decade, the kind of physician who notices what you don't say. When she walked into the exam room, she smiled, but her eyes were already scanning. You don't look sick, she said. I'm not, I replied. I'm being thorough. She glanced at the papers in my hands. Should I sit down first? I passed her the lab results. She read, her brow tightening with each line. Walter, this is serious. I know. You think someone gave this to you? I don't think. I know who and when. She set the papers on her clipboard. Let's get a baseline exam right now. Blood work, vitals, neurochecks. For the next half hour, she moved with the calm precision of a surgeon. Pulse, reflexes, pupils, pressure. She checked everything twice. Wrote no benzodiazepines detected in neat block letters on the chart. Then she pulled out a stamp and pressed it next to her signature. Keep this, she said. If anyone questions your account, this proves no trace in your system. You're clean, I exhaled for the first time in hours. Thank you, she paused, watching me button my sleeve. Walter, are you safe at home? I am now, I said. That was the truth. The evidence was stacking like bricks in a retaining wall. On the way back, I stopped at the credit union. The vault manager, Mrs. Alvarez, remembered me from years back. Haven't seen you since Helen passed, she said kindly. Back then, I was storing love letters, I said. This time, it's proof. She handed me a small brass key and led me to a quiet room lined with safe deposit drawers. I slid open box 117, laid the documents inside. Lab reports, witness forms, photographs, doctor's stamp chart. I added the note card from my nightstand. Lab, doctor, witness, box, counsel. No alone. I shut the drawer and listened to the metallic click echo in the quiet. The sound felt like the lock on a secret I refused to die with. Back home, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish. I reheated coffee, sat at the table and opened my notebook. Status. Primary test. Confirmed benzodiazepine. Secondary sample. Witnessed. Lakeview pending medical baseline. Clean. Verified. Safe deposit. Active. Risk. Contained. Underneath, I wrote one word. Next. The next was law. I picked up my phone and scrolled to attorney Ava Delgado's number. She'd handled Helen's estate, meticulous, unflappable, allergic to drama. If anyone could turn chaos into paper armor, it was her. Her voicemail picked up. Ava Delgado, law offices of Delgado and Finnegan. It's Walter Kane, I said. I need a consultation. Not hypothetical. Family matter, urgent. I have documents you'll want to see. Call me back when you can. I'll be home. I hung up and stared out the window. Across the street, kids were drawing chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. Their laughter rose like tiny alarms of life going on. My house, meanwhile, sat in perfect order, every light off, every paper labeled, every truth backed by ink. At 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Lakeview Labs text notification, analysis complete. Results consistent with prior report. Benzodiazepine derivative confirmed. 2 labs now sang the same song. That was science. That was law. I placed the new report into a clean envelope marked confirmation and slid it into the binder. Then I stood by the pantry door, hand resting on the sealed whiskey bottle. You did your part, I murmured to the glass. Now it's my turn. I could almost hear Helen's voice in the stillness. Calm, approving, proud, that night before turning off the lights. I opened my ledger again and wrote one line at the bottom of the page. Tomorrow, we start fixing the foundation. I spent the next morning staring at the ledger spread across my table. $213,000. That was the number I'd spent helping Brent over the years. College, cars, late bills, new beginnings that always ended the same way. I wasn't looking at money anymore. I was looking at my own gullibility, printed and dated. The question I kept asking myself wasn't how he did it. It was why I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to hear it in my own voice. It had started months before the bottle ever appeared, at Brookside Diner, a place where the seats were cracked but the waitress still called you Hun. Brent had asked me to meet him there to talk about the future. He came in, wearing that salesman's smile he always puts on when he's in trouble. "Dad," he said, sliding into the booth, "you and I could make life easier for everyone. Let's streamline your finances. Make sure the house, the accounts, everything is set up the simple way." I frowned. "What way is that?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. I could tell by the way he handled it that it wasn't his first copy. "All you have to do is sign this," he said. "It's just symbolic, adds my name as a co-signer, avoids probate later." There it was, symbolic. That word he uses when he's already guilty of something and wants to sound generous while doing it. I've spent my life reading blueprints. I can read people too. Symbolic, I repeated. "You know what's symbolic, Brent? Trust. You earn it. You don't print it out from the internet." He forced a laugh, stirring his coffee like it had answers at the bottom. "Come on, Dad, I'm just trying to help. Why make things harder than they need to be?" I looked at him, my son, the boy who once built model bridges on my workbench, now trying to build a shortcut through me. "Because easy doesn't always mean honest," I said. He dropped his spoon and leaned back. "You think I'd steal from you?" "I think you'd call it borrowing," I said quietly. We didn't finish our coffee. He left the bill half paid and walked out muttering something about me living in the past. That was April. 3 months later, he handed me a bottle of whiskey with a bow on it. That was July. And now, sitting here with 2 lab reports proving that whiskey was poisoned, I finally saw the line connecting those moments. He hadn't just been planning. He'd been practicing. I turned on my laptop, logged into an old credit monitoring account I'd forgotten I still had. Within minutes, I found his name linked to 3 open loans, 2 maxed-out cards, and 1 small claims court summons for defaulting on a car payment. His debt total was just under $70,000, almost the same number as my available savings. The math was perfect. Too perfect, so that was his plan. Remove the father, inherit the funds, settle the debt, start fresh. It wasn't hatred. It was strategy, and that's what hurt most. The fact that it wasn't about emotion at all. I wasn't his father anymore. I was a solution with a pulse. My phone buzzed. Mara again. Her voice was warm, as always. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. Leo says you owe him a rematch at chess." "Tell him to practice," I said. She laughed. "He's been practicing. He's got this new opening called Mara." I interrupted gently. "Has your brother said anything lately about me, about finances?" She went quiet, long enough for me to hear the low hum of her fridge through the line. "He mentioned you were redoing your will. Why?" "Just curious," I said. "He's been asking strange questions." She sighed. "He's always been good at asking, not so good at earning. That one sentence, the tired honesty of it, told me everything. She'd seen the same cracks years ago. She just hadn't wanted to watch them widen. After the call, I went to my office closet and opened the bottom drawer, the one labeled Personal History. Inside, there was a photo of Brent at 12, standing next to me on the bridge I'd helped build decades ago. He's wearing a hard hat 2 sizes too big, holding a tape measure like a sword. He'd smiled at the camera and said, "One day, I'll build something that lasts forever." I told him, "Nothing lasts forever, but you build like it will." Looking at that photo now, I realized I'd built him the same way, strong on the outside, hollow in the middle. I'd reinforced his comfort, but not his character. The sound of the front door chime pulled me back. A notification. I opened my email, a new message from attorney Ava Delgado. "Walter," it read, "I got your message. Bring everything, the lab reports, receipts, photos, tomorrow morning, and bring your calm. I can hear in your voice that you're not angry anymore. You're past that. That's when people make the cleanest moves." She was right. I wasn't angry. Anger is fire. It burns fast and leaves smoke. I felt something colder, precision. The same feeling I had on job sites when the measurements didn't line up, and I knew someone was hiding a mistake under paint. I walked to the pantry and stared at the bottle sealed in its plastic bag. "You want it easy," I whispered. "You're about to learn what earned looks like. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, one clean line at the bottom of the page. Tomorrow, justice becomes paperwork. I closed the ledger, shut off the lights, and stood by the window for a long time, watching the empty street. I thought about my son somewhere out there, maybe drinking the same whiskey from a clean bottle, thinking he'd outsmarted an old man. But the truth was simple. He'd mistaken patience for weakness, and tomorrow he'd learn the difference. By the next morning, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building, and what I was building wasn't revenge. It was structure, order, protection that couldn't be shaken by charm or bloodlines. When you spend a lifetime designing bridges, you learn one truth. You don't rebuild what failed. You reinforce what's left standing. That was my plan for the Kane family name. At 9 sharp, I walked into the law office of Ava Delgado. Tall glass doors, soft lighting, and a receptionist who greeted me by name before I even spoke. I'd worked with Ava years ago after Helen's passing. She was the kind of lawyer who carried calm the way a soldier carries a weapon, not to threaten, but to keep peace enforced. "Walter," she said, standing to shake my hand. "When a man your age calls me before noon, it's either about taxes or something that keeps him up at night." "This is the second kind," I told her, "but I've got proof." I set the folder on her desk. Lab results, photographs, the sealed bottle in a clear evidence bag, the witness forms, my doctor's stamped report. She didn't flinch. She read quietly, flipping each page like she was turning detonators off in her mind. When she reached the photo of Brent handing me the bottle at my birthday, she sighed. "Your son. My son." She closed the folder and looked at me. "You're lucky you didn't open it." "I don't believe in luck," I said. "Just timing and preparation." She smiled faintly. "Good. You'll need both. Let's secure your estate first. That's how we cut off his leverage before he realizes he's already lost." For the next 2 hours, we built the paper equivalent of a fortress. "First," she said, tapping her pen, "an irrevocable trust. All your assets, property, savings, retirement, insurance, move into it. The beneficiary will be Leo. He can't touch it until he's 18, and even then, only for education and health expenses. I'll add a spendthrift clause. That means no one can borrow against it, not even him. You'll assign Mara as trust protector." She glanced up. "You trust Mara?" "With my life," I said. "And his." "Good," she said. "Next, we'll draft a new will, one that removes Brent completely from any fiduciary roles. He won't even have the power to choose the color of your tombstone." I chuckled softly, the first sound close to laughter I'd made in weeks. "Then," she continued, "we'll file a springing power of attorney, financial and medical. It only activates if you're incapacitated, verified by 2 physicians. Primary Mara, secondary Raj Singh. Brent will have no legal standing to access accounts, property or medical records." "Perfect," I said. "And one more document, a healthcare directive. You'll specify that no sedatives or benzodiazepines can be administered without a clear medical indication and counter-signature. We'll add a HIPAA release so your team can verify prescriptions." "That's very thorough," I said. She leaned back. "I've seen cases like this. Poison doesn't always come in bottles. Sometimes it comes through paperwork and bedside forms. You're cutting off both." Her assistant came in and notarized every page one by one. The stamps hit the paper like hammer blows, heavy, final, official. When we were done, she slid 3 envelopes across the desk. "One for you, one for the bank, one for the safe deposit box. And Walter," "Yes?" "When you confront him, don't do it alone. Do it in daylight, in a public space, with witnesses, nothing behind closed doors. That's how we keep you alive and keep this clean." "I already have a place in mind," I said. "Room B at the community center. Windows on both sides. It's where I used to run the chess club." She smiled. "That's perfect. People who play chess understand pressure." I left her office lighter than I'd felt in weeks, carrying a stack of documents that felt like armor. The kind of armor no one could pry off with charm or bloodlines. At the bank, the branch manager, Mrs. Alvarez again, met me with that polite, curious look bankers give when they know something's changed in your file. "Updating beneficiaries?" she asked. "Updating the locks," I said. By the time I left, every account was redirected into the trust. The automatic transfers Brent once used were now terminated, their roots erased. He wouldn't know it yet, but he'd already been locked out of the kingdom he thought he was inheriting. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a cover sheet for the fridge. Big black letters, bold enough for a stranger to understand in a crisis. "If anything happens to me that seems unusual, contact attorney Ava Delgado and Dr. Elaine Porter immediately. I have no prescribed sedatives. I do not drink alone." I taped it right next to the magnet with Helen's favorite quote, "Truth stands by itself." It felt fitting. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. When I woke up the next morning, the house didn't feel haunted by suspicion anymore. It felt engineered, tested, reinforced, sealed. I walked room to room, checking the windows, the locks, the alarm battery. Not because I expected him that day, but because men like Brent don't just break in with crowbars. They break in with manipulation. They knock softly, smiling, saying, "You can trust me," and I was done trusting whispers. At 9:15, Ava called again. "Everything filed," she said. "It's legal, active, and irreversible. You're officially firewalled." "Firewalled," I repeated, liking the sound of it. "Now," she said, "you have a choice. Confront or cut off quietly. Which one are you ready for?" "Confront," I said, "but not with shouting. I'll do it the way you do it in court. Calm, documented, and public." "Then you'll need your evidence binder," she said. "The one that speaks for you," I smiled. "Already made it." That night I sat at my dining table again, the documents spread neatly in front of me. Trust, will, power of attorney, directive, lab reports, witness signatures, 2 photographs. Of Brent, one as a boy on the bridge, one as a man handing me poison in a bottle. The contrast hurt. But pain is still data. It tells you what to reinforce. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. I didn't flinch. This time, the storm was on my side. I poured a glass of water and raised it like a toast. "To truth, with a paper trail," I whispered. Then I shut off the light, leaving the table as it was, a battlefield mapped in ink. Tomorrow, the confrontation would begin. Not behind closed doors, not with fists, not with shouting, but with daylight, witnesses, and the weight of every document I'd ever filed. Because justice doesn't need volume, it just needs evidence. The day of the confrontation came quietly. No thunder, no drama, just a clear morning that felt like it had been waiting for me to make up my mind. I ironed my shirt the way Helen used to, pressing each seam until it looked like discipline. Then I opened the binder, my fortress of paper, and checked every tab one more time. Trust, will, power of attorney, lab reports, photos, witness statements. Every section carried a piece of the truth I was about to deliver. At the bottom, I added one last sheet. 4 lines typed in 12-point font. Simple, factual, unarguable. The kind of page that could change a man's life with a single signature. By 5 p.m., the community center parking lot was half full. Families leaving the library. Kids chasing each other toward the gym. The hum of normal life all around. Exactly what I wanted, witnesses without realizing they were witnesses. Room B sat at the end of the hallway. Big windows on both sides, a door that never closed all the way. The chess club used to meet there every Thursday. The blood drive folks were setting up next door. The smell of coffee and disinfectant hung in the air. "Exactly," she said. "We're moving this from emotion to process." That phrase, moving to process, felt like stepping from gravel onto concrete. She had the paperwork filed by noon. The trust notices went to the bank. The will updates to the clerk. The health directives to Dr. Porter's office. If Brent tried to jiggle any handle with my name on it, The door would not budge. At 1:10, I drove to the clinic to leave a copy of the directive and the confession with Dr. Porter. She scanned the pages, then looked up at me with that steady physician's face. "How are you feeling, Walter?" "Like a bridge that passed inspection," I said. "Good," she nodded. "If anything changes, mood, sleep, appetite, you call me. Grief doesn't only come when people die." I thanked her and walked out into a day that didn't feel heavy anymore. Even the heat seemed honest. Plain July heat doing what July heat does. Back home, I stood in the pantry with the sealed whiskey bottle in my hand. It had been the sun, around which every bad thought orbited. Now it was just an object with a label. I retied the bag and set it in the safe with the reports. Evidence. Sleeping, not erased. When I closed the safe, I noticed the bluebird magnet on the fridge holding my cover sheet. I left it there, not for fear, for memory. Let the house remember what it learned. The doorbell rang at 2. Leo stood there with a carton of blueberries and a grin that didn't ask permission to be happy. "Mom said I could come over and make pancakes," he announced. "Best news I've had all week," I said, stepping aside. We cooked like we were on a small crew, silent handoffs, clean tools, a few bad jokes. He stirred batter. I flipped. When the first pancake hit the plate, he said, casual as a weather report, "Did he come yesterday?" He did. Mara was already waiting near the vending machine, pretending to scroll her phone. Raj sat at a table nearby with a chessboard, quietly moving a bishop back and forth. They both knew why they were there. At 5:29, I heard the familiar rhythm of Brent's footsteps. Confident, careless, entitled. He walked in wearing sunglasses, even though the room was flooded with daylight. "Dad," he said, grinning, "this is dramatic. You planning a lecture or a party?" "This," I said evenly, "is a meeting." He looked around. "Why here?" "Because daylight is safer than walls," he smirked. "You've been watching too many detective shows." I didn't respond. I opened the binder and set it on the table between us. "Sit!" He dropped into the chair with the slouch of someone who still believed he was in control. "Okay," he said, "what's all this? You changing your will again?" I ignored the jab. "Before we start, I need you to understand something. Every word that comes out of my mouth from this moment on is documented. Every claim has proof. You'll leave this room knowing exactly what I know." He leaned back, arms crossed. "Then let's hear the speech." I pulled out the first lab report, placed it in front of him. "That's from Riverton Diagnostics. You remember the whiskey you gave me?" He looked at the paper, then at me. "Of course." "Did you finally open it?" "I did something smarter," I said. "I tested it." His smile faltered just a little. "You tested it?" "2 labs, independent, same result. A benzodiazepine derivative. Sedative, cumulative, lethal over time. That's science, Brent, not opinion." He let out a short laugh, fake and nervous. "That's ridiculous." "You think Dad, you must have had it mixed up. Maybe the bottle was tampered with before I bought it." I slid another page across the table. The second lab's confirmation, the witness signature from Raj, the time-stamped photos. Lakeview Lab says otherwise. "This sample came directly from your gift, sealed under supervision." Brent's face tightened, the smirk collapsing under its own weight. "Okay, even if that's true, you really think I would do something like that to you?" "I don't think," I said calmly. "I know. And now, so do 2 certified labs, 1 physician and 1 attorney." He laughed again, louder this time, trying to turn panic into confidence. "You sound insane, Dad. You're blowing a stupid misunderstanding into a whole production. You want to embarrass me in front of—" He stopped when he noticed Raj at the chessboard, watching silently. "In front of him," Brent said sharply. "In front of truth," I corrected. "He's here to witness. That's all." He stood up suddenly, pacing. "You can't just accuse me like this." I leaned back in my chair, voice steady. "Sit down, son. This isn't an accusation. It's an opportunity." That word made him freeze. "Opportunity?" "Yes, to face what you've done before it faces you in a courtroom." He turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" I opened the next tab. "Here's what's already in motion. An irrevocable trust for Leo. Effective immediately. You're not a trustee. You're not a beneficiary. You don't even appear on the contact list. The will's been rewritten. The power of attorney and healthcare directives filed. You have no financial or legal standing in my life anymore. He stared at me, eyes wide. You're cutting me out. I'm protecting what's left, I said. Mara and Leo deserve better than an heir who sees his father as an obstacle. His jaw tightened. You're letting her manipulate you. She's always turned you against me. I smiled, a tired, quiet kind of smile. Mara didn't have to turn me against you, Brent. You did that yourself. He slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. You're destroying your own family over a bottle of whiskey. I pushed the binder toward him. No, Brent. You destroyed it when you turned family into inventory. He stared at the papers, at the blue seals and signatures, at his own name crossed out in places where it used to belong. So what, you want me to sign something? He asked bitterly. Yes, I said. 4 lines. I pulled out the final page. The short statement Ava had written, the one meant to separate the guilty from the damned. I acknowledged that a beverage I gifted was found adulterated by independent labs. I agree to enroll in treatment verified by independent parties. For 1 year, I will have no unsupervised access to Walter or his home. I understand my removal from all fiduciary roles and beneficiary positions is already executed. He read it twice. His breathing slowed. You want me to confess? I want you to heal, I said. But healing starts with honesty. He shook his head, eyes wet now, voice cracking. You're doing this because of money. No, son, I said quietly. You did this for money. I'm doing it for peace. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, I could hear the chess pieces clicking softly, someone laughing near the vending machine. Life moving on. Brent's eyes darted to the door, to the window, to me. He was trapped, not by walls, but by truth. He picked up the pen, gripped it so tight his knuckles whitened, and signed his name. When he pushed the page back, his hand shook. You happy now? No, I said. But I'm safe. He looked at me one last time, the kind of look that's half anger, half apology, then walked out into the fading light. He didn't slam the door. It just swung gently until it stopped. Mara entered a minute later. Did he? Yes, I said. Raj gathered the papers, checked the signatures. Clean, he murmured. It's done, I exhaled. For the first time in months, my lungs didn't feel heavy. Thank you, I said. Mara squeezed my shoulder. You okay, Dad? I will be, I said. Bridges hold, Mara, even after they shake. We walked out together into the parking lot. The sun was low now, stretching long shadows across the pavement. Somewhere down the street, Brent's car pulled away, small, quiet, forgettable. In my hand was the signed confession, 4 lines that said everything words never could. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Justice doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it signs its own name. That night I sat at my kitchen table again, binder open, confession page resting on top. The house was silent, steady, honest. I looked at the documents, the photos, the signatures, and I realized I hadn't won. I'd just stopped losing. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, my heart finally went still. The storm was over, but the bridge, the one I built from proof and patience, it still stood. And tomorrow, it would carry the weight of peace. I slept like a man who'd finally turned off a machine that had been humming in his head for months. No dreams, no sudden jolts awake, just the quiet you get when a problem is contained. Not solved, maybe, but surrounded by bolts that won't come loose. In the morning, I laid the signed confession flat on the dining table and photographed it with the date showing on the stove clock. Then I slid it into a clear sleeve and opened my binder to the tab I'd labeled with one word. After. That's where justice lives once the shouting part is over. I called Ava first. He signed, I said. I expected as much, she replied. Men who bet on charm fold when the cards on the table say evidence. Forward me a scan. I'll file notice letters and schedule an intake with a treatment center we trust. You won't speak to him about logistics. We will. Good, I said. No private meetings ever. He waited, fork hovering. And the grown-ups handled the grown-up parts, I said. You did the brave part. He nodded and ate like a boy who'd earned it. After lunch, he pulled out a notebook and showed me a geometry problem shaped like a ladder leaning against a wall. There's a trick, he said. There usually is, I replied. But a trick is just a fact wearing a mask. He solved it, grinning at his answer like it was a secret handshake. Then we played chess on the old board. He beat me with a line I hadn't seen since I was his age. I told him so. He filed that compliment away in the place boys save rare things. Before he left, he looked at the pantry door, then at me. You kept it? For now, I said. Some truths you save, so you never have to argue them twice. He thought about that, then nodded. Okay, he hugged me the way kids do when they still believe hugs do actual work in the world. I believe it too. After Leo left, the house returned to the kind of silence that isn't accusing. I brewed coffee and took it to the back steps, where Helen and I used to sit when the maples threw their long afternoon shade. I talked out loud to her, the way widowers do when the yard is empty and the air is kind. You'd like the way this ended, I said. Not with a siren. With a signature, Ava called again at 5. Treatment intake is scheduled, she said. Transport is arranged. For the next year, any contact goes through me. If he violates the no unsupervised access clause, we escalate. You do nothing. Understood? Understood, I said. It felt like the handover at the end of a project. Tools cleaned, site cleared, paperwork signed, keys given back to the owner. As the sun softened, I walked through every room. Not to check locks, those were fine, but to take stock. The photographs on the mantel. Helen with flower on her cheek. Mara at graduation. Brent at 12 with a tape measure. Leo in a crooked cap. I didn't move any of them. The past doesn't need rearranging when the present is in order. I ate a simple dinner, washed the plate, and left the binder open on the table. It looked less like a weapon now, and more like a ledger balanced to 0. Not victory, just accuracy. Later I wrote a short letter to Leo and slipped it into the safe with the evidence. I told him that courage isn't loud, that daylight is a tool, and that truth doesn't fear paper. I told him the most dangerous lies arrive wrapped as shortcuts. I told him I'll be here as long as I can, but I've already made sure that when I'm not, what matters will still be standing. Before bed, I opened the window and let the warm night air move through the room. Somewhere down the block, a radio played a song from the year Helen and I first danced in a kitchen too small for 2 people to dance in. The memory didn't hurt. It held. People think endings are loud. They're not. Endings are quiet checklists. Call the lawyer, scan the page, file the form, lock the safe, turn off the light. Then you sleep because the house is honest again. This wasn't an epilogue. It was simply the day after. And in the day after, the measurements line up, the numbers match, and the structure holds. Tomorrow I'll make pancakes first and coffee second, because that's how Leo likes it. Tomorrow the binder can stay shut. Tomorrow the bridge still stands. I started writing the letter a week later. The way you start anything you don't want to finish. Slow, careful, half hoping the words will refuse to appear. It wasn't to Brent. Some things don't need to be said twice. It was to Leo. I dated the page, wrote his name the way Helen used to, with a long looping L, like a kite string reaching for air. Leo, if you're reading this, it means the hard part is already behind us. I want you to remember that the truth doesn't shout, it documents. It leaves trails in ink and witnesses who don't need convincing. The words came easier after that. I told him about the bridge we built, not the steel one over the river, but the invisible one between generations. I told him that he was already walking across it the day he warned me not to drink that whiskey. You saved more than a life that day, I wrote. You saved the proof that honesty still runs in this family's blood. I paused then, stared out the window. The evening light hit the glass just right, turning the street into gold. Somewhere a lawnmower buzzed. Somewhere else someone was laughing. The world kept moving as it should. I wrote more about courage, about how justice isn't revenge, about how forgiveness is only safe once the danger's gone. People will tell you to forgive quickly, I wrote. Don't. Forgive truthfully, not conveniently. Remember, mercy without boundaries just invites the same storm to come back wearing new clothes. When I finished, the letter was only 3 pages long. short for a life, long for a confession. I folded it, slipped it into the same envelope as the trust papers, and wrote on the front in steady letters, "For Leo, when he's old enough to understand." Then I put it in the safe beside the bottle, the reports and the binder that had saved my life. I turned the key, heard the soft click, and felt the kind of peace you only get after documenting every lie into silence. It wasn't an ending. It was a record, a ledger closed but not forgotten. You'd think the silence after justice would feel like relief. It doesn't. It feels like weight redistributed, steady but never gone. Every morning now starts the same. Coffee first, then I open the blinds, and the light falls on the same kitchen table that once held a bottle meant to end me. I keep the surface spotless, not out of fear but respect. This is the place where truth stood its ground. Some days, I still catch myself glancing at the chair Brent sat in during the confrontation. My mind replays his face. That moment his certainty cracked, and he realized paper was stronger than pride. People think revenge is the loud part of justice. It's not. Revenge shouts. Justice signs its name in ink and goes quiet. Ava called yesterday just to check in.
"You're holding up?"
she asked. "I'm holding steady," I said. "That's better," she replied. "Steady lasts longer than strong," she's right. Strength flares and fades. Steadiness builds foundations. I spend afternoons fixing small things around the house, door hinges, the porch light, the cracked tile by the hallway. Repairs are simple. The heart's the harder renovation. But every screw turned, every hinge aligned, feels like reclaiming space that betrayal tried to hollow out. Sometimes I hear Leo's laughter over the phone when Mara calls. That sound resets the air. He tells me he's designing his own bridge model for school. Just like Grandpa's, he says. I tell him the same thing I told his father once. Every inch matters. Get the math right early, and the structure will stand forever. This time I know he's listening. At night, when the street outside goes still, I pour one glass of water and sit by the window. The safe hums quietly behind me. A metal box full of proof, but also of peace. There's a cost to quiet. It's the space where anger used to live. It's the sound of restraint, the price of surviving with your conscience intact, but it's a price worth paying. Because in the end, I didn't just keep my life, I kept my evidence, my dignity, and the blueprint of what it means to build something that doesn't fall when the storm comes. And maybe that's all justice really is. A structure that stands silently, long after the noise fades. It took me 3 weeks to decide what to do with the bottle. Not because I was scared of it anymore. Fear leaves when facts settle. But because I needed to understand what it meant. It wasn't poison now. It was a symbol of trust broken, of lessons earned, of how easily love turns lethal when entitlement puts on a smile. One evening near sunset, I carried the bottle out to the back porch. The sky was that warm Ohio orange that looks like forgiveness pretending to be fire. I set the bottle on the railing, untied the plastic bag, and held it up to the light. The liquid shimmered like memory. Beautiful. Deceptive still. I thought of Helen, of her steady hands in the garden. Her rule that everything broken had to either be fixed or buried. Rot doesn't disappear, she used to say. It just hides until you do something honest with it. So I did. I unscrewed the cap, tilted the bottle, and poured the whiskey slowly into the soil beside the porch, the earth where she used to plant her marigolds. The scent rose up, sharp and smoky, then vanished into the dirt. For a moment, it looked like the ground was swallowing the past. I whispered, "Here's to endings that don't need applause." The glass was half empty when I stopped. I left the rest, not out of sentiment but evidence. Proof that even poison loses its power once daylight gets to it. Leo arrived a few minutes later, running up the steps with his backpack bouncing. "Grandpa," he said breathless, "Mom said we could have dinner here tonight." "Good," I smiled. "I was just finishing something." He noticed the bottle and frowned. "Is that?" "It was," I said gently. "Now it's just a reminder that even bad things can teach you something if you handle them right." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away for a time when he'd need it. "What did it teach you?" he asked. That silence isn't peace, if it's hiding something, I said. And that love without respect is just hope waiting to drown. He looked at the wet soil. Then it's over. It's documented, I corrected. That's better than over. We went inside. The smell of pancakes filled the air again, his favorite, blueberries and all. He set the table while I brewed coffee, humming a tune Helen used to hum when the world made sense. After we ate, I tucked the empty evidence sleeve into the safe with the rest of the papers. I didn't need to open them again. The truth, once signed, doesn't need repetition. Before bed, I stood by the window and looked at the spot where the whiskey had soaked into the ground. The earth looked ordinary again. Quiet, not haunting. I realized that's what justice truly sounds like. Not a gavel, not a siren, just the soft silence of something finally finished. I turned off the light, whispered goodnight to Helen, and walked to bed, and that's how it ended. Not with revenge, but with record. Not with rage, but with proof. The last pour wasn't whiskey. It was peace.